The rain poured down in torrents, pounding relentlessly on the rusted tin roof of the Bite Box restaurant in the outskirts of Ridgemont. It echoed through the empty dining area in a cold, metallic rhythm. The dim fluorescent lights reflected off rows of vacant tables and chairs, casting a ghostly glow over the room's decay. In the shadows, a man known only as Tom, at least that's what everyone here believed, was carefully sweeping the back section of the floor, even though it was already spotless. In reality, Tom was Ethan Price, a billionaire silently posing as a night shift janitor. His wrists ached from scrubbing with industrial-grade cleaners, the kind he'd only read about in safety reports. The same hands that had once signed billion-dollar contracts were now cracked and raw. He used to run a nationwide restaurant empire from a glass office that overlooked a sparkling skyline, and now, here he was, scrubbing floors with no name and no authority. The wall clock read 11:48 p.m. The store had closed over 10 minutes ago. Most of the night crew had gone home, leaving only Rick, the night manager, tapping his fingers lazily on the counter while counting cash with an expression of habitual disdain. "Hey, new guy," Rick called out, not bothering to look up. "Make sure the dining room trash is emptied before you leave, and don't forget to lock the dumpster. Damned raccoons keep breaking into it." Ethan gave a quiet nod, keeping his head down to avoid eye contact. He hid the look that used to make executives tremble. The irony wasn't lost on him. He owned this building and over 400 other Bite Box locations across America. He could buy out Rick's entire life with the click of a button, but he wasn't here for power. He was here for answers. Over the past year, the Bite Box brand had been battered by negative press. Anonymous reports accused the company of worker exploitation, toxic culture, and management indifference. Ethan had been labeled the air-conditioned CEO, the tech investor who didn't understand people. Maybe they were right. For the past 3 weeks, he had moved like a ghost through Location 37, one of the oldest branches in the franchise, tucked away in the fading town of Ridgemont, just hours from the company's gleaming headquarters. But here, there were no lights, no fanfare. Only weariness, shadows, and a lingering sense that something was deeply wrong. And spreadsheets couldn't explain it. Ethan pushed the heavy trash bin toward the back door. The wheels squeaked over the damp tile. Outside, the rain hung like a thick curtain, blocking out the world. A gust of cold air swept in as he shouldered the door open. Under the flickering backlight, the large metal dumpster stood like a rusted beast. As he wheeled the bin toward it, something shifted in the shadows. His heart jumped. In past board meetings, he'd heard vague mentions of late-night drug deals behind certain locations. Was he about to witness one? But the figure that emerged from the darkness made him freeze, not in fear, but in disbelief. She wasn't a dealer or a junkie. She was a young woman, maybe in her late 20s, thin, soaked, clinging to a worn-out jacket. Her arms hugged herself against the cold. Behind her stood 2 small children, a boy and a girl, no older than 10, huddled together beneath a leaky awning. Their backpacks drooped heavily, as if carrying the weight of their entire struggling world. The woman glanced around, fear etched in her expression. She knelt down and whispered something to the kids. They stayed still, eyes locked on her. She approached the dumpster, using both hands to lift the lid, a motion practiced many times before. There was speed in her movements, but also shame. Ethan didn't move. He knew he should say something, warn her she was on private property, but he couldn't. His throat closed up. In that moment, reports, charts, the CEO title, all of it felt meaningless in the face of this. A mother searching for scraps of food for her children in the cold, unrelenting rain. Rick would have expected him to turn and walk away, pretend he saw nothing. Instead, Ethan stepped back into the shadows and watched. The woman was trembling. Her hands, red and cracked, reached for a fast food takeout bag resting near the top of the trash pile. It looked clean, probably an unclaimed order tossed during kitchen cleanup. She peeked inside, then gave a small nod. "Come on," she whispered to the kids, "before someone sees us." Her voice was soft but tight with anxiety, like someone who'd lived too long afraid of being noticed. The younger child, a boy Ethan guessed, suddenly coughed, a wet, rattling sound that cut through the rain. The woman spun back, pulled him close, and rubbed his back gently. "We'll get something warm soon, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling under the weight of hope. "Just a little longer." Something twisted in Ethan's chest. He didn't know if it was guilt, grief, or clarity. Maybe all three. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something real, something human. He stepped out into the weak light. "Excuse me," he said softly. The woman turned with a start, panic flashing across her face. In an instant, she moved in front of the kids, shielding them with her body, protective, instinctive, fierce. "We're leaving," she said quickly. "We didn't take anything that wasn't already thrown out." Ethan raised both hands in peace. "I'm not reporting you," he said gently, nodding toward his janitor uniform. "I'm just the guy who mops the floor." A flicker of relief passed across her face, but it was brief. Suspicion returned just as quickly. Ethan noticed then. She was beautiful, in a way dulled by exhaustion, but not erased. Her eyes, ringed with fatigue, still held a quiet defiance. Her soaked hair clung to her face, framing features that struck something in Ethan. Familiarity, maybe? He made a snap decision. "There's better food inside," he said. "In the break room. Leftover sandwiches that didn't make it to the front, still fresh. They'll be thrown out tomorrow anyway." She hesitated. Her expression tightened. "We don't need charity." "It's not charity," Ethan replied with a small smile. "It's just trash, or, as accounting likes to call it, inventory reduction." She didn't laugh, but she didn't walk away either. Her eyes lingered on his, weighing something deeper. Then the child coughed again, harsher, deeper, and Ethan saw it the moment her pride cracked under the weight of reality. The wall didn't fall, but it shifted. "Wait here," Ethan said, turning quickly toward the back door. His pulse was pounding. He stepped into the warm air of the kitchen, realizing only now how cold he'd been. This wasn't part of the undercover plan. Not part of the mission. But that woman's eyes, steady and silent, they had changed everything. Inside the break room fridge, he found exactly what he'd hoped. A tray of untouched chicken sandwiches, a sealed pack of apple slices. He grabbed a few sauce packets, 3 bottles of water, and packed it all into a clean takeout bag. "Tom, let's go," Rick's voice barked from the front. "I need to lock up." "Almost done," Ethan called back as he slipped out the back door once more. The woman was still standing there, huddled under the narrow overhang, her 2 children clinging to her sides. The boy, now Ethan could clearly see his eyes, wide and round like winter moons, peeked out from beneath his mother's coat. The older girl watched Ethan in silence, her gaze openly cautious. "Here you go," Ethan said, offering the bag of food. "It's freshly made. Today's batch. The apples are still crisp." The woman hesitated, then reached out. Her fingers were so cold that when they brushed his hand, Ethan felt the chill cut straight to his chest. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice almost drowned by the rain. "You didn't have to do this." "Neither did you," Ethan replied, nodding toward the dumpster. "There are food banks." She let out a soft, humorless laugh. More bitter truth than amusement. "They need ID, proof of residence, and they're open during the day when I'm working another job." She looked away, her voice tinged with irony. "Besides, people here remember me." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, Rick's voice cut through the rain, more irritated this time. "Tom, where the hell are you?" "You should go," she said, stepping back and gently pulling her children with her. "Thanks again, Tom." Ethan stood still, watching as the 3 of them disappeared into the thick curtain of rain. A hollow weight pressed against his chest, as though a rope were tightening around it. He didn't know their names, didn't know their story, only that, for the first time in years living at the top of the corporate pyramid, he had truly seen a person. The name Tom echoed in his mind, a name she had spoken without knowing it wasn't his. It was a mask, a role he had worn to blend in, to observe the lives of those working under the very roofs he owned. For 3 weeks, he'd moved through this restaurant as a silent witness, taking notes, evaluating, but this encounter, this was different. It wasn't about performance metrics anymore. It was personal, a collision with something raw, something deeply human that years of financial reports had numbed him to. As Ethan turned to head back inside, something on the wet tile caught his eye. A crumpled, water-stained piece of paper. A receipt, likely dropped from the woman's pocket. He bent down and picked it up, instinctively looking around to call after her, but they were already gone, swallowed by the rainy darkness of the empty parking lot. He looked down. Despite the smudged ink, he could still make out the logo, Bite Box, and at the bottom, in fading handwriting, a customer name, Lena Carter. That name, it tugged at something in his memory, like a long-buried splinter suddenly rising to the surface. "Tom?" Rick's voice barked from the back door. "What the hell are you doing out there?" Ethan quickly tucked the receipt into his pocket. "Coming!" he shouted back, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He couldn't shake the image of Lena and those 2 children, trembling in the cold rain. Back inside, the restaurant was silent. Rick had already left, as usual, shirking protocol. He hadn't checked the building, hadn't armed the alarm. He'd simply tossed the responsibility to Tom and walked out the front door. A clear violation of company policy, one of many Rick regularly ignored. Ethan slumped into a chair in the break room and pulled out the receipt, gently smoothing it flat on the table. Under the harsh flicker of fluorescent light, he examined it again. Bite Box, Store 37. This very location, dated March 17, 2023, nearly 2 years ago. Lena Carter, he whispered. The name felt both familiar and distant. It stirred something heavy in his chest, a gnawing sense that he had heard of her before, read about her, maybe even reviewed her case. But from where? Still wearing his janitor uniform, he rose and made his way to the manager's office. Unsurprisingly, Rick hadn't locked it. Another infraction. The computer was still on, its screensaver drifting lazily across the monitor. Ethan jiggled the mouse, no password prompt. Rick had left the system logged in, a basic security breach, and a perfect opportunity. Ethan typed Lena Carter into the employee search bar. 1 result. He clicked. The deeper he read, the heavier his heart became. Employee name, Lena Carter. Feeling. ID number 4419. Petition, shift supervisor. Termination date, March 21, 2023. Reason, theft of company property, falsification of inventory records. Notes. Employee became combative when questioned. Security footage confirms repeated food theft. Not eligible for rehire. Report filed by Richard Donovan, store manager. Ethan leaned back, the chair creaking under him. Theft? No, that couldn't be. She hadn't looked like a thief. Desperate, yes? Exhausted, obviously. But when she initially refused his offer, there was a pride in her eyes, not deceit. He opened the customer transaction records and searched for Lena again. Dozens of purchases. The most recent one matched the receipt he'd found, March 17, 2023. Order 23,791. 2 kids' meals, 1 premium chicken sandwich, 1 side salad, 15% employee discount applied. Total, $15.87. Everything appeared normal. Earlier purchases showed the same pattern. Modest, paid in full, all standard entries. So why the accusation? He switched back to her personnel file and scrolled for attachments. A linked security report appeared with surveillance footage, but when he clicked on it, a message popped up. Archived to central server. Administrative clearance required. Of course, files related to major infractions were stored at corporate for legal purposes. As Tom, Ethan couldn't access it, but as Ethan Price, CEO, he could retrieve it with a single call. Just as he was about to log out, another file caught his attention. Inventory Discrepancy Report, March 16, 2023. One day before Lena's last recorded purchase. 5 days before her termination. Ethan opened the file and scanned through the jargon. A standard notice of mismatch between recorded sales and physical inventory. Reported shortfall, $327.00 in food over the past month. Not a huge sum, but just enough to raise suspicion. Ethan frowned, the pieces beginning to shift in his mind. A picture was forming, one that didn't match the official story. At the bottom of the report was a single line: suspected internal theft, investigation pending, initiate. Hello, not Rick Donovan, Lena Carter. Ethan froze. She had filed the report. She had discovered the discrepancy and done exactly what the company expected. Reported it. She did the right thing, and 5 days later, she was fired for stealing the very inventory she had flagged. The system had turned on her. It branded her a thief and took everything: her job, her reputation, her stability. Ethan grabbed his personal phone, the one not linked to company systems, and began scrolling through old emails. 6 months ago, his head of HR had sent a misconduct summary report. He remembered glancing through it, noting a rise in food theft cases, but never diving deep. He found the email in a section titled Notable Cases, Midwest Region. Her name appeared. Lena Carter store 37 times, terminated for theft following inventory discrepancy. Noteworthy. Employee had initially reported the inventory issue, no criminal charges filed. Termination upheld after managers submitted documentation. Matter closed. 3 cold words. Matter closed. Case dismissed. Life discarded. Ethan leaned back in the chair, a swirl of emotion rising in his chest. Anger, sorrow, and above all, guilt. A single mother, once a shift supervisor, once a pillar of the team, was now digging through dumpsters to feed her children, cast out of the workforce simply for trusting that the system would protect the truth. He looked around the empty office. Only the soft hum of the AC and the blue glow of the computer screen lit up the white-painted walls. At every Bitebox location, the same corporate slogan was posted in bold, visible letters: caring for the community, one meal at a time. The words struck him now as painfully ironic. Was this what caring looked like? Carefully, Ethan folded the crumpled receipt Lena had dropped and slipped it into his wallet. Tomorrow, he would call to request the original surveillance footage and start reviewing the management record of Rick Donovan, a man who Ethan now suspected was anything but clean. Rain was still falling as Ethan exited the restaurant, armed the security system, locked the back door, and stepped into the night. But this time, every step he took felt heavy with a renewed purpose. His undercover mission had just gained a clear direction: uncover the truth about Lena Carter. And if that meant setting things right, then he would be the one to do it. But first, he had to find her again. Not as Tom, the nameless janitor, but as Ethan Price, the man who could restore her name, if she was willing to trust him. The next morning, Ethan didn't show up for his shift at Bitebox. Instead, he called in sick, a convenient cover for a day of quiet work in the shadows. He spent the first hour in a secure meeting with the internal investigations team, ordering a full review of everything tied to Lena Carter's case. Then he began asking around the neighborhood, discreetly inquiring where a homeless mother might go for help. After only 3 questions, a name came up: Pine Street Community Center. The building was run down, with peeling concrete walls and flickering lights. but inside it was surprisingly warm. Volunteers moved with purpose. Strangers exchanged sincere smiles. The kind of warmth that money could never buy. Ethan, still going by Tom, entered carrying a box of donated blankets. A middle-aged woman approached with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. "First time volunteering?" she asked, extending her hand. "Tom," he replied, shaking her hand. "Just trying to give a little something back. We always need extra hands." Margaret, the center's coordinator, smiled. "We're serving lunch soon. Think you could help set up tables?" Ethan nodded and followed her into the kitchen. The atmosphere here was nothing like the high-pressure kitchens he was used to. No shouting, no stress over output, just the quiet rhythm of teamwork. Then he saw her, Lena. She was arranging silverware trays, her figure lean and still in the harsh white lighting. She looked paler than he remembered, her hair pulled back, her cheeks hollow from fatigue or hunger, maybe both. But her movements were precise, steady. Even in the harshest circumstances, she held herself with dignity. Margaret leaned in and whispered, "She's one of our regulars, not as a guest. She volunteers in exchange for meal vouchers for her kids. Most self-respecting woman I've ever met." Ethan swallowed hard, emotion tightening in his throat. "How long has she been coming here?" "Over 2 years," Margaret said with a sigh. "Lost her home right after losing her job. Hasn't been able to find anything steady since. Just temp work here and there." She guided him to a station near Lena. When he set down a tray, Lena looked up. Their eyes met, just for a flash. "You're from Bite Box," she said quietly. Her voice carried no hostility, only wariness. "You're the janitor?" Ethan nodded. 100 things rushed to his lips, but he knew. Right now, words didn't matter. Trust had to be earned, slowly, step by step. "Tom, I didn't expect to see you here." Ethan paused as Lena spoke. She didn't look up. Her hands continued organizing food trays with the quiet rhythm of someone holding herself together with routine. He offered a hesitant smile and moved closer. "I wasn't expecting to see you either." She gave a slight nod, still not looking at him. "Thanks for last night." The kids really appreciated it. There was a flicker of warmth in her voice, and it eased something inside Ethan. "Are they here?" "No, they're at school," Lena replied, shrugging lightly. "Maya's in 3rd grade. Ethan, my son, he's in kindergarten." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Ethan," she glanced up. "Problem?" "No. It's a good name." He focused on stacking silverware, trying to hide his surprise. A pause stretched between them, filled only by the quiet clatter of trays and cutlery. Ethan finally broke the silence. "Actually work at Bite Box 2, just started a few weeks ago." That got her attention. She stopped, looked directly at him for the first time. "Do you like it?" she asked, eyes steady. "The manager's tough," Ethan said carefully. A spark flashed in her gaze. Anger, maybe even pain. "Rick Donovan." Ethan nodded. "You know him?" Lena let out a humorless laugh. "Oh, I know him. He's the reason I'm here, handing out food to the hungry instead of earning a decent living doing a job I used to love." She lowered her voice, a sharp edge returning. "Let me guess. He's still stealing food and blaming the staff." Her words struck like a lightning bolt. It was exactly what Ethan had uncovered the day before. He swallowed hard. "What happened?" She was quiet for a moment, then seemed to decide she could trust him, at least enough to tell her story. "I used to be a shift supervisor," she said slowly. "Started noticing food going missing. Expensive stuff. Steaks for premium sandwiches, whole cases of chicken, but the system said it was sold. I reported it. Did exactly what I was supposed to do." She looked down, her fingers tightening on a tray. "And Rick didn't like that." Ethan clenched his fists. 3 days later, the security cameras caught me taking food at the end of my shift. She continued, her voice heavier now. It was food that was going to be thrown out. Company policy says staff can take leftovers, but Rick said I'd been stealing for weeks. He had logs, timestamps, evidence. It was my word against his. She turned her head away, her expression hollow. And you know who the company believed, right? The man with 20 years in the system, or the single mom who dared to speak up. Her story matched exactly what Ethan had seen in the records that morning. Rick's personnel file was spotless on the surface, but buried complaints told another story. Every one of them filed by women. Every one dismissed for lack of evidence. "Did you appeal it?" Ethan asked, his voice gentle, as if afraid his question might shatter her. "To who?" she replied with a bitter laugh. "The regional manager was Rick's college roommate. I filed a formal complaint, but it disappeared into the system. Then Rick didn't just get me fired. He called up his buddies at other chains and poisoned the well." She looked down, her voice catching. "I worked my way up from cashier to shift supervisor over 2 years. I was just 6 months away from qualifying for the management training program." Ethan felt like a boulder was pressing on his chest. He couldn't begin to imagine what it must have felt like to have every door slammed shut just for telling the truth. "What about the footage? Did you ever see it?" "No." Lena met his eyes now, the anger and pain compressed into something sharp and searing. "They said it was restricted to protect company interests. Rick claimed it showed me stealing, manipulating logs. I was never allowed to see it." She clenched her fists, her voice low and tight. "I never took anything, not a single French fry. But now, who's going to believe me?" Before Ethan could respond, Margaret's voice called everyone together to prep for lunch service. Lena turned and walked quickly back to the counter. Ethan stood there, frozen. Her story wasn't just about a single injustice. It was a damning indictment of a system broken at its very core. During the entire lunch shift, Ethan watched Lena quietly. She worked without pause, serving meals with a warm word for nearly every person who passed through. The guests knew her by name, and she knew theirs. No one watching her that day would have called her a failure. She stood tall, with a grace that couldn't be taken away by lost wages or stolen titles. As the crowd thinned, Ethan noticed 2 small figures slip in through the side door. Same eyes. Same soggy jackets from the night before. It was the 2 children from the dumpster. Maya immediately spotted her mother and waved excitedly, the simple joy of a child lighting up her whole face. Her little brother Ethan didn't hesitate. He ran straight into his mother's arms, wrapping around her legs with delight. "Mommy, we planted seeds at school today," he chirped, his voice cutting through the room like sunlight through storm clouds. Lena's face lit up. Every trace of exhaustion, of fear, of endless struggle vanished the moment she bent down to hug her son. "It's wonderful, sweetheart. What kind of seeds?" Ethan watched silently, the moment searing itself into his memory. In that instant, Lena wasn't a woman left behind by the system. She was just a mother, strong, loving, and fully present. Margaret stepped beside him, speaking softly, as though not to disturb the moment. "Those kids are her whole world. She works 3 part-time jobs, volunteers here, and never misses a single parent-teacher meeting." Ethan gripped the box of supplies in his hands. 3 jobs, and she still has to dig through trash for food. His voice cracked with disbelief. Margaret sighed. "The system isn't made for people who fall off the tracks. Lose your job, you lose your home. No address, no job. It spirals fast." By then, Maya had noticed Ethan. She whispered something to her mom. Lena turned to him, hesitated, then gave a slight nod. "Maya, this is Mr. Tom. He works at Bitebox now." The girl studied him closely, her eyes wary like a child who's seen too many adults disappear. "Is he nice, Mommy?" Lena's eyes met Ethan's, weighing him. "I think so, honey. He helped us last night." Maya's expression softened. "Thank you for the chicken sandwich," she said quietly. "It was really good." The innocence of her gratitude hit Ethan like a wave. No child should have to thank a stranger for discarded food. No mother should be punished for doing what's right. As Lena gathered the kids' backpacks preparing to leave for another shift, Ethan knew this was the moment. He couldn't just stand by any longer. It was time to act, time to stop pretending, not as Tom the janitor, but as Ethan Price, the man who could fix what had been broken. He had built a system, and that very system had betrayed a family who deserved far better. The next week passed in a blur. By day, Ethan continued playing his role of mopping floors, emptying bins, but his eyes never stopped watching. Every shady action Rick took, every whispered insult or suspicious inventory move was documented. Piece by piece, the puzzle of abuse and misconduct became crystal clear. By night, he coordinated with his legal team, constructing a thorough plan for what was coming. And 3 afternoons that week, Ethan returned to Pine Street. He didn't press. He didn't ask for trust. He simply showed up. Until slowly, cautiously, Lena began to let him in. A trust rebuilt one brick at a time. On his 3rd visit, while stocking cans in the food pantry, Maya walked in, clutching a folded piece of colored paper. Her steps were shy but steady. "Mr. Tom," she asked, her voice soft but clear. "I made something for you." Ethan blinked, setting the can down and kneeling to accept the paper. When he opened it, a laugh escaped him. Not mockery, but pure emotion. It was a drawing, done in bright markers. A man with spiky brown hair wearing a bite box uniform and a superhero cape made of sandwich meat and lettuce. Around him stood 3 smaller figures, clearly Lena and her 2 children. At the top, in careful block letters, "My hero, Mr. Tom." "This is me?" Ethan asked, his voice catching. Maya nodded, blushing. "You gave us food. You're nice to my mom. She doesn't have a lot of friends anymore." Her simple honesty cut deeper than any boardroom critique ever had. He'd made billion-dollar investments without flinching, but this, a child's faith, nearly broke him. "Thank you, Maya. This is the best gift I've ever gotten. I'll keep it forever." "Mom says not to take help from strangers," she added, glancing down. "But she also says to be grateful when people are kind. Grown-up stuff is complicated." Yeah." Ethan nodded. "Adults forget what really matters sometimes." "Ethan gets sick a lot," she continued, without hesitation. "Mom says it's from moving too much last winter. But he's better now since we live in Miss Margaret's basement." Ethan froze. "You live here? At the shelter?" "Not in the shelter part. There's a little room downstairs. Mom cleans the center to help pay rent, but I heard her crying last night. We might have to move again." Before he could respond, Lena appeared behind her daughter. Her expression shifted the moment she saw them, warmth fading into caution. "Maya, I was looking for you. It's time for homework." "I was just showing Mr. Tom my drawing," Maya said quickly. Lena's eyes fell on the paper in Ethan's hands. Something flickered across her face. Embarrassment, perhaps. Or sorrow. Or maybe both. "That's very kind of Mr. Tom, but we need to start your math." As Maya reluctantly walked off, Lena lingered. "If she shouldn't bother you." "She didn't," Nathan said softly, still holding the drawing. "She's an incredible kid. They both are." For a moment, pride replaced the lines of worry on her face. Then silence stretched between them, until Ethan finally said, "Maya mentioned you might have to move again." Lena stiffened. "We're fine." "I didn't mean to pry." "Yes, you did," she said calmly. "You've been asking questions. About me, about Bitebox, about Rick. Why?" Caught off guard, Ethan hesitated. I think what happened to you was wrong." Lena glanced at the drawing in Ethan's hand. In that moment, a flicker of emotion crossed her face. Part embarrassment, part exhaustion, but undeniably touched by warmth. "Thank you, Mr. Tom, for looking at her drawing," she said, then gently led Maya away. But just before leaving, she turned back, her voice low but clear. She shouldn't have bothered you." "She didn't bother me at all," Ethan replied. "She's truly special." The tension in Lena's face softened slightly. A flicker of maternal pride shone through. But just as quickly, worry returned to her features. Ethan took a breath, summoning his courage. Maya mentioned, "You might be moving again?" She froze. "We're fine. I'm not trying to get into your business," Ethan said carefully. "You are," Lena interrupted, not angry, "just tired. You've been asking me all week about Bitebox, about Rick. What is it you want?" Ethan hesitated, but this time he couldn't back down. "I think what happened to you was wrong. And what exactly do you think you can do about it, Tom? You're just a part-time janitor." Lena crossed her arms, her gaze sharp enough to cut through the disguise he'd worn for weeks. But this wasn't just suspicion. She was reading him like an open book. "Actually, I'm starting to wonder if that's all you are." Ethan stood still, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Your hands." She nodded toward them. "No calluses. Your shoes cost more than my family eats in a month. And the way you ask questions, like someone who expects answers." His face flushed with heat. He'd been careless, too confident in the role he'd crafted, too sure she wouldn't see through it. "Lena, I don't." She raised a hand, her voice cold and firm. "I don't care who you really are. Journalist, corporate spy, internal investigator, fine. Just one thing. Don't use my kids." Her voice softened, but her resolve didn't waver. They've been through enough, and in that moment, Ethan understood. The force that had kept Lena going all these years wasn't anger or even hope. It was motherhood. It was the unyielding instinct to protect. The humility in that realization made him bow his head. Not in shame, but in respect. "I'm not trying to exploit you or your children," he said quietly. "But it's true. I haven't been completely honest about who I am or why I'm here." Lena said nothing. Her expression was closed off, like a door that had just slammed shut. "I think I might be able to help. With your job. With clearing your name." She let out a laugh, brittle, hollow, like glass about to crack. "I've heard that before. From the labor board, from a free legal clinic, from some intern at a legal aid center. No one wants to take on Bitebox for someone like me. You're not someone like anything. You're decent. You're brave. Then tell your boss that." She turned to walk away, but stopped again, her voice resolute, her back to him. "Listen, Tom, or whoever you are. I don't want pity. I don't want a handout. I want one thing. What I earned." She turned, eyes burning like molten steel. "A clean record. A steady job. So my kids don't grow up thinking hunger is normal. That dumpsters are part of the plan." Those words echoed long after she disappeared from the room. Ethan stood frozen, Maya's drawing still in his hands, now carefully tucked into his wallet beside the receipt bearing the name Lena Carter. That night, in the silence of his hotel room, Ethan laid out all the evidence he'd gathered. Internal complaints against Rick, most from female employees, all swept under the rug. Inventory discrepancy reports that Rick had quietly resolved. And finally, the surveillance footage Ethan had accessed using his CO credentials. It showed no theft, no misconduct, just Lena distributing leftover meals to staff, following company policy to the letter. Rick Donovan had orchestrated a cover-up to conceal his own embezzlement. And the system Ethan himself had built, a top-down hierarchy with zero transparency and a bias toward management, had allowed it to happen. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Surprise audit at store 37 confirmed for 2:00 p.m. tomorrow. Legal and HR will be present. How do you want to handle it?" Ethan looked up at the hotel mirror, where Maya's drawing now hung. A caped, sandwich-clad hero scribbled in marker. It was simple, and yet it spoke volumes. Hero. Ethan Price had never seen himself as one. He was just a man who'd lost sight of the people behind the numbers. But tomorrow he'd make it right. He texted back, "I'll be leading the audit in person, and I'm bringing the full weight of the company with me." At 1:55 p.m. the next day, tension crackled like static in store 37. Rick Donovan paced the floor, sweating under the fluorescent lights, barking orders at his staff. "Wipe those windows again. Maria, condiment station's a mess. Fix it. And where the hell is Tom? He was supposed to be here by noon." The staff scurried to comply, exchanging nervous glances. Rick's temper was always bad, but today it was volcanic. He sensed something, that this inspection wasn't just routine. At exactly 2:00 p.m. the front doors opened. 5 people entered, all in sharp business attire, faces unreadable. Leading them was a man every employee in the fast food world recognized, Ethan Price. Rick froze. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed again, like a fish out of water. Mr. Price, I didn't know you were coming, I thought." Ethan extended a hand, his voice calm, unflinching. "We've never met in person, have we, Mr. Donovan?" Rick shook his hand weakly. "It's an honor, sir. If I'd known, I would have rolled out the red carpet." "No need," Ethan said, his tone cool. "I wanted to see things as they really are." There was no doubt now. The storm had arrived. "Well, that would defeat the purpose of a surprise inspection, wouldn't it?" Ethan replied with a thin smile. His voice remained calm, but his eyes left no room for doubt. "Allow me to introduce my team," he continued, turning to the group that had entered behind him. "This is Miranda Chin, Senior Legal Counsel, James Wright, Head of Internal Audit, Sarah Patel, Executive Vice President of Operations, and Daniel Martinez, our new Director of Human Resources." Each nodded in turn, their expressions professional but their eyes sharp, assessing Rick like scalpels cutting through layers of false confidence. With every name Ethan listed, Rick seemed to shrink a little more. The facade of confidence crumbled, revealing a man clinging to the last threads of his authority. "Would you mind if we use your office for a preliminary discussion?" Ethan asked. But his tone made clear it was not a request. Rick swallowed hard. Of course. He gestured toward the back. "Right this way." Then he turned to his staff. "Everyone, just keep doing what you're doing. This is a routine inspection." No one believed him. The tension in the restaurant was thick enough to cut with a knife. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew. This wasn't just a routine checkup. Inside the cramped manager's office, Rick hovered near the doorway like a man planning his escape. Ethan took Rick's chair without asking, a silent assertion of authority. The other executives positioned themselves around the room, effectively blocking every physical and psychological exit. "Mr. Donovan," Ethan began, his voice casual, as if making small talk over coffee. "Do you know why we're here today? I assume it's part of the new corporate oversight initiative." Rick forced a strained smile. "I assure you, Store 37 is operating efficiently. Our numbers have we're here about a specific employee," Ethan said, opening a leather folder and pulling out a manila file. "Lena Carter." Rick froze, as if the name itself had sucked the air from the room. "Carter?" He tried to keep his tone neutral. "She hasn't worked here in nearly 2 years. Terminated for serious misconduct." "Yes," Ethan nodded, flipping open the file. "According to your report, theft of company property, falsification of inventory records, serious accusations, all documented." "Exactly." Rick jumped in quickly, as if trying to control the narrative. "Security footage, inventory logs. Everything was done by the book." "Interesting that you mention that," Ethan replied, nodding toward James Wright, who brought up a chart on his tablet. "Our audit team has reviewed the discrepancies Lena Carter originally reported, the ones that led to your investigation of her." Rick's throat clicked as he swallowed. "That's old news. I don't see the point because the same pattern continues," James cut in, turning the tablet toward Rick. "Systematic shortages in high-value items, followed by manual inventory adjustments." The exact pattern Carter flagged. "I can explain," Rick stammered. "Please do," Miranda said, pen poised over her legal pad. Rick looked around, eyes darting for an exit that didn't exist. "There must be some mistake. I've managed this store for 7 years. My record is spotless." "Is that so?" Ethan pulled out another document. "Let's talk about Emily Delaney. April 2021. Cassandra Willis. November 2022. Bethany Palmer. July 2023. Rick's eyes widened. "All 3 filed complaints against you. All 3 were terminated within a month. They were problem employees. They were witnesses," Ethan said, his tone suddenly colder. "And Lena Carter was the first to see the big picture. That's why you had to get rid of her. Because she wasn't just uncovering inventory fraud, she was exposing how you used your position to systematically target vulnerable women in the workplace." Rick clenched his fists, face flushed from rage or fear. It was hard to tell. "This is outrageous. You can't just barge in here and accuse me of—" "Actually, I can," Ethan said, rising to his feet. He wasn't physically imposing, but his presence filled the room. "I own this company, Mr. Donovan. Every chair, every fryer, every slice of pickle in every sandwich belongs to me, and you've been stealing from me for years. But worse, you've ruined lives to cover it up." Rick stepped back. "You can't prove anything. It's her word against mine. She's just a desperate single mom." At that moment, the office door opened. Sarah Patel stepped aside to reveal Lena Carter. She stood tall, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes clear and unwavering. Behind her stood a uniformed police officer and 2 attorneys from Bitebox's legal team. "Hello, Rick." Lena's voice was steady, her gaze a floodlight piercing the shadows that had once shrouded her. "What is she doing here?" Rick sputtered. "She's not allowed on the premises." "Ms. Carter is here at my invitation," Ethan said calmly, "as the victim of fraud, defamation, and retaliation, all committed by you. She has every right to witness what comes next." "Fraud? Defamation?" Rick laughed nervously, voice cracking. "This is ridiculous." "Is it?" Ethan gestured toward Daniel Martinez, who tapped a few commands into his laptop. The monitor on the wall flickered to life. The footage was from 2 years ago, pulled from Bitebox's own security archives. It was the same video Rick had used to accuse Lena. "This is the footage you claimed showed Miss Carter stealing," Ethan said, locking eyes with Rick. "Our legal team conducted a forensic analysis. It was edited." The room fell silent as the unaltered footage played. There was Lena, following every end-of-shift protocol to the letter, logging entries, distributing leftover meals according to company guidelines, not a single move out of line. Then the footage jumped, now showing Rick Donovan sneaking into the walk-in freezer after hours, stuffing expensive cuts of meat into a duffel bag. "We have 2 years' worth of similar footage," Daniel said quietly, "along with bank records showing deposits inconsistent with your reported salary." Rick suddenly lunged for the door like a panicked animal, but the police officer was already in position and stepped forward to block his path. "Richard Donovan," the officer said in a calm but firm voice, "you're under arrest for embezzlement and financial fraud." Rick struggled. "You can't do this. You—" "Be quiet." The officer continued reading him his Miranda rights as he handcuffed him. Ethan turned to Lena. In their eyes was a storm of emotion. Disbelief, release, and a deep pain that was finally beginning to wash away. "Miss Carter," Ethan said formally, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, "on behalf of Bitebox, I offer our sincerest apologies for the injustice you've endured. Every report you submitted was accurate. You acted with complete integrity, and the company failed you." He reached into his case and pulled out an envelope bearing the official Bitebox seal. "This letter clears your employment record of all accusations, restores your reputation, and includes compensation for your losses. It also contains an offer for a position at our corporate headquarters, if you're interested." Lena accepted the envelope with trembling hands. She looked at him, her eyes glassy but unbroken. "Why now? After 2 years?" she asked. Her voice didn't accuse, only carried the weight of a long sorrow. Ethan glanced at Rick being led away in cuffs, then back to Lena, because finally, someone decided to listen. They stepped out of the office. The restaurant staff had gathered outside, watching silently. No one spoke until Maya came running from the back, her eyes sparkling with innocent excitement. "Mom, did they catch the bad guy?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Lena knelt and wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, it's all okay now." Maya looked up at Ethan. No longer Mr. Tom, but a sharply dressed man with kind eyes. "Mr. Tom, why are you dressed like that today?" Lena looked over Maya's shoulder at Ethan, her eyes asking a question she hadn't yet voiced. Ethan smiled softly. "It's a long story, but if you'll let me, I'd love to tell you all of it." 3 months later, Ethan Price stood at the window on the 37th floor of Bitebox Tower, the tallest building he'd ever built, not from steel and glass, but from hard-earned insight and repentance. Below, the city shimmered like an unfinished promise, but he wasn't looking down. His gaze was fixed across the hall, where Lena Carter was giving a presentation to a group of 20 new regional managers. She wore a tailored Navy fuel executive uniform, the Bitebox logo embroidered in silver over her heart. She was no longer the woman huddled beneath a leaking awning on a rainy night. She was a leader now, radiating confidence and purpose. Her hands moved with emphasis, guiding each slide. Ethics, transparency, rebuilding Bitebox from the ground up, starting with people. Ethan smiled. He remembered the evening they first truly talked, after Rick's arrest. Maya had sat beside them, her superhero drawing of Mr. Tom laid out on the table. Lena had asked, "So, you're not Tom the janitor?" "No," Ethan had said with a nod. "I'm Ethan Price." "Ethan Price? As in the billionaire CEO who goes undercover to get in touch with reality?" "That's the short version." But her voice wasn't angry, just searching. It was a simple question, but it carried a mountain of weight behind it. Ethan had tried to explain the negative reports, the disconnect he felt from the company he'd built, the need to see the truth with his own eyes and feel it with his own heart. "So what was I then?" she'd asked, her voice like a blade, sharp but necessary. "A special project? A checkbox on your monthly morality checklist?" Ethan hadn't answered immediately. He'd looked at Maya, at her drawing, then back at Lena. "No," he said. "You weren't a project. You were a wake-up call. The reason I can't close my eyes anymore." Lena hadn't responded, but she nodded, and for the first time, she'd smiled. "No," Ethan had said again, looking her straight in the eyes, not flinching. "You're not a project. You're the alarm bell I needed." He paused, his voice quiet. "You showed me what my company had become when I stopped looking at the people who make it work." Lena hadn't said a word. She just looked at him, a look full of history, of loss, of a woman pushed to the edge who chose to stand anyway. She had accepted the job offer at Bitebox, not out of gratitude, but practicality. It was a rare, timely chance to reclaim her voice and rebuild her standing in the system that had cast her out. Her first demand wasn't salary. It was housing assistance for 28 other employees wrongfully terminated during Rick Donovan's tenure. That was her condition, and Ethan hadn't hesitated. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. His assistant poked her head in. "Sir, the community center reps are here for Ms. Carter's presentation." "Thank you. I'll be right there." Ethan left his office and crossed the hallway, where Lena's voice carried through the glass doors of the conference room. The Single Garant Employment Initiative isn't charity, it's smart investment. These are hard-working people who just need flexible schedules and a livable wage. In return, we get loyalty and productivity, 18% higher than the industry average. He entered quietly, standing at the back, eyes on her. Lena stood tall, confident, composed, wearing the new deep gold executive uniform, the silver Bitebox logo gleaming on her chest. She didn't need notes. Every word came from lived experience, Every statistic was paid for in sleepless nights and strength forged from hardship. That blend of knowledge and scars made her irreplaceable. When the presentation ended, the regional managers stood and approached Lena, some shaking her hand, others asking for her card. She smiled politely, scanning the room until her eyes found Ethan standing in the corner. She walked over. "Mr. Price, I didn't expect you to attend," she said. Her tone was professional, but the warmth in it was unmistakable. The distance between them, once so vast, was now just a memory. "Your presentation was impressive," Ethan said. "Looks like the managers were convinced." "They should be," Lena replied, her eyes glowing with unfiltered pride. "The pilot program in Denver has already cut turnover by 32%. The numbers speak for themselves." Ethan took a second to really look at her. She was no longer the woman huddled beneath an awning in the rain, clutching her children while scavenging for leftovers. She was a leader, someone who belonged in this role, not because of pity but because of skill and resilience. He shifted the tone gently. "Oh, by the way, the marketing team approved Maya's drawing for the new kids menu. They love it." Lena's face softened. The tension in her features melted for a rare, tender moment. Her eyes lit up with surprise, then slowly turned to quiet joy. "She's going to be so happy," she whispered. "She still thinks Mr. Tom is a sandwich-caped superhero. Then I guess I should try and live up to that." They stood there together in a moment of stillness, not as CEO and employee, but as two people who had weathered a storm, come to understand each other, and more importantly, were now rebuilding something that had been broken. Ethan turned toward the window, where the golden light of late afternoon spilled across the city, on rooftops, on nameless people, the ones who kept everything running. "Thank you," he said quietly. Lena looked at him and smiled softly. "Don't thank me. Just keep listening." Since she found out her drawing was chosen, Maya's only been sketching food heroes. Lena chuckled. "And little Ethan keeps asking when his picture will make it onto a menu too." The name Ethan no longer made the CEO wince. Instead, it had become a silent thread between them, a coincidence turned into something deeply human. "How are they settling into the new place?" he asked, his voice gentle with genuine care. "Maya has her own room for the first time in her life. There's not an inch of wall left that isn't covered in her art," Lena said, the joy sparkling in her tone. "And little Ethan hasn't had a single asthma attack since we moved. The doctor says his lungs are clear, now that we're not living in a damp basement." Laughter echoed from the hallway. The doors swung open. Maya and little Ethan burst in, trailed by Lena's assistant, who shrugged apologetically. "Mom, we finished our homework," Maya shouted, then froze when she spotted Ethan. At 9 years old, she still looked at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Hi, Mr. Price." "Hi, Maya. I hear you're our newest menu designer." Ethan smiled warmly. Maya beamed. "The new menu is way better than the old one. That one only had a maze, and it was too easy." Little Ethan tugged at his mom's sleeve. "Mom, can we get ice cream now? You promised." Then Lena ruffled his hair with a smile. "I did promise." She turned to Ethan. "Want to join us? I think the CEO ought to taste test the new Sunday bar. Don't you?" Ethan glanced at his watch. His next meeting wasn't for another hour. "I think that's a perfectly valid use of executive time." As they walked toward the elevator, Maya slipped her tiny hand into Ethan's. It was warm, trusting, the kind of touch that only came from a child who had learned to be wary of adults, but now knew it was safe to believe again. "I made you another drawing," she whispered. "It's you, but not wearing janitor clothes this time. I can't wait to see it." In the executive cafeteria, Lena sat at the table, signing documents her assistant had delivered, while her children loaded chocolate sauce and rainbow sprinkles onto ice cream, piles the size of small mountains. The scene felt so normal it was surreal, as if she were dreaming a life she once thought unreachable. From a rainy dumpster to a high-level corporate meeting room, the path hadn't been smooth, but every step she'd taken had been hers. When it was time to part ways, Lena took her children home before heading back for an evening strategy session, and Ethan returned to prepare for his next meeting. Before she left, he handed her a small, neatly wrapped box. "What's this?" she asked, surprised. "Just something I think you should have." Back in her car, after buckling the kids in, Lena opened the box. Inside was a simple, elegant frame. Behind the glass was a faded receipt from Bite Box Store 37, dated March 17, 2023. The ink was smudged, but still legible. Lena Carter. Attached was a small handwritten note, the writing firm and clear. "Not a mistake, a beginning. Thank you for teaching me how to truly see people." Back in his office, Ethan stared at the wall in front of him. The spot where the receipt had once hung was now filled with Maya's newest drawing, bright, colorful, and full of life. Her mother, in an executive uniform, stood next to a suited man. Between them were two children, all holding hands beneath a smiling Bitebox logo. In crayon-scrawled handwriting across the bottom it read, "Our Bitebox family." Not a fairy tale ending, but enough to begin again. Ethan sat at his desk, eyes lingering on the picture. He knew there were still thousands of receipts, thousands of stories, thousands of lives waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard. But for today, this one was enough.